Hello Internet, my name is Father Casey, and for more than 5.5 years I have devoted countless hours to creating content for this channel that I thought was interesting and important, trying to get to the essential teachings of the Church, the most practical advice for life as a Christian. And that's great, I've enjoyed that. The Church is filled with interesting and important things, essential teachings and practical advice, and you should know all that stuff. But what about all the stuff that isn't practical? The stuff that you absolutely don't need to know. The stuff that is, in a way, completely useless to your everyday life. Does anyone ever stop to marvel at that stuff? When you've been a part of a church that's been around for 2,000 years, there are a lot of historical facts that get overlooked through the years, and I think that that's a shame. And so, for your viewing pleasure, here are 18 straight minutes of useless Catholic facts. The longest chapter in the Catholic Bible, coming in at a whopping 100 verses, is Daniel chapter 3. The reason I say the Catholic Bible is because Protestant Bibles removed the canticle at the end of that chapter, making it only 30 verses in theirs. The longest chapter in the Protestant Bible, then, is Luke 1 at 80 verses. 48 out of the first 49 popes were named a saint. That's a pretty good run. The one combo breaker? Liberius, a man who was exiled by heretics for defending orthodoxy and is venerated as a saint in the Eastern Church. So he did all right for himself. I'm sure he's still a pretty good guy. Speaking of popes, there have been 21 popes that have taken the name John, the most of any name. Interestingly enough, though, 2 of those Johns were referred to as John the 23rd. The reason for this discrepancy is that John the 16th and the first John the 23rd were both anti-popes, and because of a clerical counting error, John the 20th was skipped. The saints have long been revered for their ability to intercede for the faithful, and thus have been assigned patrons of certain causes and groups of people. Nearly everyone has been accounted for over the years, and so those with sexually transmitted infections can pray to Saint Fiacre de Bruil. Those needing protection from rats or mice should pray to Servatius of Tongeren, and unattractive people, although you're all beautiful in God's eyes, can pray to Saint Drogo Saborg. The 4 Hebrew letters representing God's divine name, YHWH, are referred to as the Tetragrammaton. Since there are no vowels in ancient Hebrew, no one knows exactly how it was originally pronounced, but the Latinization of the word, coupled with a German pronunciation, is how we get the name Jehovah, or more commonly, Jehovah. The windowed wall on the upper level of large churches, sitting above an adjacent roof, is called a clerestory. Their purpose was to admit light and fresh air. Vatican City has the highest crime rate of any sovereign nation in the world, coming in at around 150%, meaning that there are more crimes committed than actual citizens. This is pretty understandable when you consider that there are only about 500 actual citizens in the whole city, while 5 million tourists visit every year. Sometimes even death won't free you from your day in court, as was the case for Pope Formosus. After his death in 896, his body was dug up, placed in papal vestments, and seated on the throne to face charges brought against him by his successor. The trial was aptly named the Cadaver Synod, and unfortunately for Formosus, he was found guilty of perjury and acceding the papacy illegally, nullifying his time as pope. As popular as Brazil's Christ the Redeemer statue is in Rio de Janeiro, it is not the largest statue of Jesus in the world. For that, you will have to go to Bolivia to see the Cristo de la Concordia, standing 132 feet tall. The Summa Theologica of St. Thomas Aquinas, a compendium of the major teachings of the Church written for seminarians, is estimated to have 1.8 million words, about 2.5 times longer than the Bible. The 5th word of the 5th verse of the 5th chapter of the 5th book in the New Testament is words. The word cardinal can refer to a bird, a color, or a high-ranking Vatican official responsible for electing and advising the Pope. Which one came first? The church one. From the Latin cardinalis, meaning hinge, these men served as pivots of the church. Wearing red to symbolize the blood of Christ, cardinal came to reference a color and then eventually a red bird. Today there are 5,377 bishops alive in the world, but as of the recording of this video, only 2 are over the age of 100. Congrats to Laurent Noel and Antonio Alfonso de Miranda, who both turned 100 last year. Before the Motion Picture Association in America began issuing ratings for movies, people looked to the Catholic Legion of Decency. Their ratings were so well respected that films actually submitted to the Catholic organization before publication for fear of being condemned publicly. Notre Dame football has a career record of 9-11 playing on January 1st, including a 1-7 record since 1995. This is interesting, one, because Notre Dame is one of the most decorated programs in football history, and so one would expect them to play well in the biggest of bowl games, but also because January 1st is the solemnity of Mary, Mother of God, whom Notre Dame is named after, Our Lady. The ancient synod in Elvira decreed in 314 that baptized women were not to associate with hairdressers or men with long hair, lest she be denied communion. This canon was never included in any ecumenical council and does not appear in the current code of canon law. Everyone knows that Charles the Great, or Charlemagne, was the first Roman emperor. But did you know that there were two other Charleses in his line? Charles the Bald and Charles the Fat. While we commonly say that meat is forbidden on Fridays during Lent, the actual designation, as defined by the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, only applies to warm-blooded land animals. If you've got a hankering for alligator tails or frog legs during Lent, there's no reason to abstain, although you should probably still limit your portions. It is a season of fasting. The Nicene Creed, recited at Mass most Sundays, did not actually come from the Council of Nicaea in 325. Although a creed was recited at the original Council of Nicaea, it was later edited and officially adopted by the Council of Constantinople in 381, becoming what we know today as the Creed from Mass, and more appropriately referred to as the Niceno-Constantinopolitan Creed. Except that's not entirely true either, as the creed was updated 200 years later in the West, much to the ire of the Eastern Church. What changed, you asked? The words "and the Son" were added, indicating that the Spirit came from both the Father and the Son. On the other hand, if you believe that the Trinity consists of the Father, the Son, and Mary, and that the Son is the result of a marital union between the other two, you are a part of a group known as Collyridianism. Also, you're a heretic. St. Catherine's head is on display in her hometown of Siena. It's important to note that Catherine wasn't beheaded as a martyr. Someone just thought it was a good idea, after her death, to sever her head from the rest of her body and put it on display. Speaking of relics, it's probably assumed that the Vatican has the most relics of any city in the world, and that's correct. What you might not know is that second on the list is the ancient and holy city of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Before Pope Francis, the last pope to take an original name rather than simply adding a number to the name of a previous pope was Pope Lando in 913, who just used his birth name. The last pope to simply stick with his birth name was Adrian IV in 1522. Before taking a religious name, Mother Teresa of Calcutta's name was Agnes. If you're in France and want to pray in the chapel where St. Joan of Arc prayed, tough luck, because in 1966 it was moved to the campus of Marquette University in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. A traditional Roman cassock has 33 buttons on it, one for each year that Jesus lived. The most plentiful letter in the Catechism is the letter T, occurring 41,289 times. 22,216 of those are the word the. Al Smith was the first Catholic nominated for president in U.S. history. Unfortunately for him, he lost in a landslide to Herbert Hoover, winning only 7 states. Oddly enough, 6 of those states were in the Deep South, where few Catholics lived at the time. The 1917 Code of Canon Law stated that when explorers discovered new lands, the territory would be placed under the jurisdiction of the diocese from which the expedition originated. Since the astronauts of the Apollo 11 mission that landed on the moon launched from Orlando, then Bishop William Borders considered himself the Bishop of the Moon. The classic uniforms worn by the Swiss Guard, those who protect the Vatican, were actually designed in 1914 in an attempt to look more medieval. Pope Leo X once owned an elephant named Hanno as a pet, a gift he received from King Manuel the Fortunate of Portugal. Leo loved the elephant very much. He sat by its side when the elephant died and later wrote a poem in his honor. As a replacement, King Manuel tried to send him a rhinoceros, but the boat carrying the animal sank on its way. It is forbidden for a priest to absolve a sexual sin in the confessional if he was involved in the act in question. Physically attacking the Pope incurs a penalty of automatic excommunication. In the United States, there are 7 additional holy days of obligation beyond one's requirement to attend Mass on Sunday. Assuming that Mass is about an hour, those doing the bare minimum will spend only 0.67% of their life in Mass. Even though there is a general rule against married men becoming priests, around 125 converts to the Catholic faith have been given an exception. Ordinarily, the sacraments are reserved to Catholics and Orthodox Christians alone. But in the case of grave danger, a Protestant unable to reach their minister and in agreement with the teachings of the Catholic Church can receive the Eucharist and be validly anointed. Saint Bede the Venerable is the only English-born doctor of the Church. Saint Anselm, the far more famous English monk of Canterbury, was actually born in Italy. Although the Waldensians were excommunicated all the way back in the 13th century, they somehow managed to stay in existence until the present day, living now in Italy, Germany, Uruguay, and the United States. Before becoming one of the world's biggest action stars, Tom Cruise was just a 14-year-old boy attending a minor seminary run by the Franciscans. Although he attended the school for only 1 year and never showed serious aspirations of becoming a priest, it does make you wonder what the world would have been like had he stuck with it. The movie Sister Act turned out nothing like originally intended. Bette Midler was first cast for the lead, her name was supposed to be Terry, not Dolores, and the first draft of the script made it a bawdy satire, not a family-friendly classic. So many rewrites and changes went into the production that the original writer didn't even want to put his name on it and is instead credited with a pseudonym. The image of hell freezing over is often used to describe something that is never going to happen, like the New York Jets winning another Super Bowl. And yet, in Dante's Divine Comedy, written in 1472, Satan is found in the deepest circle of hell, encased in waist-high ice. Speaking of mythological works of literature, the Lord of the Rings series is not just an epic high fantasy novel, it's also packed full of Catholic imagery and themes, like how the three main characters, Frodo, Gandalf, and Aragorn, represent the threefold ministry of Christ: priest, prophet, and king. There are only 2 UN-recognized countries in the world without laws for divorce: Vatican City and the Philippines. The next time a pope takes the name Sixtus, he will be referred to as Sixtus VI. Unfortunately, this sounds interesting only in Romance languages, as he would be referred to as Sixtus Hadodik in Hungarian, Sixtus den Siete in Norwegian, and Sixtus Alisadis in Arabic. Not exactly the same. At the end of Mass, the celebrant and servers reverence the altar before walking down the aisle while music plays, and that seems pretty normal. And yet, there is technically no such thing as a recessional in the Roman Rite. The Missal simply says, after making a profound bow with the ministers, he withdraws. If the priest has got somewhere to be, he can just bounce. The Church has an official book of blessings used to bless various objects and people. Some blessings are used often, like the blessing of a house or Advent wreath, but some are a bit more unique, like the Order of Blessing and athletic field, tools or other equipment, fishing gear, or new church doors. Pope John Paul II canonized 482 saints in his time as Pope. That comes to one canonization every 20 days for more than 26 years. The first woman to receive a doctorate in computer science was Sister Mary Kenneth Keller, a Sister of Charity of the Blessed Virgin Mary. Her thesis focused on constructing algorithms that performed analytic differentiation on algebraic expression formed in CDC Fortran 63. You know, that. There are more Catholics in Brazil than in Italy, France, and Poland combined. The southernmost Catholic church in the world is called the Chapel of Our Lady of the Snows, located at Belgrano 2 Base at Bertreb Nunatak. For those unfamiliar with the area, that's on the continent of Antarctica. St. Francis Xavier was the first Christian to make it to Japan, helping the Jesuits convert more than 100,000 people to the faith in just a few decades. Eventually, priests were expelled and Christians were persecuted, but Christianity survived for more than 300 years underground. Taking a quick break for a second, I'd like to talk to you about Squarespace. Just kidding, no one sponsors this channel. But I would like to point out that you have been watching this video for 14 minutes. Clearly, you're either asleep or you're actually enjoying it. If you are in fact still awake, why don't you go ahead and click that subscribe button? Maybe even click the bell for notifications. Thanks. Alright, back to useless stuff. Although they say that everything is bigger in Texas, the state is also home to what it claims to be the smallest Catholic church in the world. Seating only 20 people, the church building of St. Martin's in Warrentown, Texas is only 192 square feet in area. Compare that to St. Matthew Catholic Church in Charlotte, North Carolina, the largest parish in the United States in terms of congregation. As of 2017, they reported having 10,500 families, more than 13% of the entire population of Charlotte. Most people use Roman Catholic and Catholic as synonymous terms, but not every Catholic is technically Roman. There are 23 autonomous particular Eastern Catholic churches in union with Rome that have never been Roman or Latin. Every 2 or 3 years, Catholic teenagers from around the world gather for what is referred to as World Youth Day, an international celebration consisting of prayer, confessions, shows, music, and of course, Mass with the Pope. In 1995, 5 million people attended the Papal Mass in the Philippines, a record held until 2015, when 6 million people attended, also in the Philippines. The earliest baptismal fonts were simple rectangular holes in the ground. The reason? They were meant to look like tombs, the place where one died and rose with Christ through the waters of rebirth. Before the Eucharistic prayer begins, there is a dialogue between the priest and a congregation known as the preface. The Lord be with you and with your spirit, lift up your hearts, that whole thing. Throughout the liturgical year, there are a total of 156 options for this prayer. The Big Bang Theory is a cosmological model of the observable universe from the earliest known periods through its subsequent large-scale evolution. It's also the result of the work of a Catholic priest, Georges Lemaitre, who was the first to suggest that the expanding universe could be traced back to a single point. Modern musical notation in the Western world has the Catholic Church to thank for its organization and structure, as it was the Church's desire for uniformity that a comprehensive system was developed. In remembrance of Jesus' 40 days in the desert, Catholics devote 40 days in Lent to doing penance. Only there are 46 days between Ash Wednesday and Easter. Besides that, Ash Wednesday is not a holy day of obligation. No one actually has to get ashes. The Dome of the Santa Maria del Fiore, the cathedral in Florence, is the largest masonry structure in the world, consisting of over 4 million bricks. The base of the dome begins 177 feet above the ground and rises another 108 feet. If you think that's incredible today, think about building it in the 13th century. No wonder it took 140 years to build. The maximum alcohol percentage of wine used at Mass is 18%. If it's higher than that, your Mass is invalid, and your congregation might turn into invalids. The first instance of a bishop wearing a pectoral cross comes in the 13th century, although it took a while for it to become widespread. There are 4 main Marian hymns, each designated for a particular period of the church year. Alma Redemptoris Mater is sung from Advent until February 2nd, Ave Regina Caelorum from February 2nd until the Easter Vigil, Regina Caeli for Easter, and Salve Regina from Pentecost until Advent. Where did these hymns come from, you ask? Well, it's hard to say for sure, but many believe that the Salve Regina, and possibly even the Ave Regina Caelorum, were written by Hermanus Contractus, also known as Hermann the Lame, since he was born with a cleft palate, cerebral palsy, and spina bifida. The lectionary cycle of readings at Mass covers a large part of the Bible, but nowhere close to all of it. 96.3% of Mark is read throughout the years, but 6.3% of the book of Numbers, and none of 1 Chronicles, Judah, or Obadiah are read. All told, if you were to attend Mass every day of the year, you'd get 13.5% of the Old Testament and 71% of the New Testament, meaning that you should probably do some outside reading on your own. Technically speaking, you can't spell Catholic without chaotic. Despite being a global church, the first non-European cardinal to vote in a papal conclave was James Gibbons, the Archbishop of Baltimore, in 1903. Today, 66 of the voting cardinals are from outside of Europe, accounting for 52% of the votes. That is a big shift. And finally, wrapping up this useless time together, the Salvator Mundi painting by Leonardo da Vinci was sold at an auction in 2017 for $450 million. With that amount of cash, you could buy 1.5 million moderately priced chalices, 16 million study Bibles, or 36 billion hosts for Mass. That is a lot of potential holiness in one painting, and this has been a lot of useless Catholic information in one video. I hope you've learned something new that you can share at a socially distanced cocktail party sometime in the future, and that you've enjoyed this video. If you have, please consider subscribing, and I'll catch you in the next one.